Tonight on District Wire News, more than 270 people are dead and thousands injured so far after a 7.2 magnitude earthquake rocked eastern Turkey. Rescuers are searching for survivors. A full report from Turkey.
And George Washington University students are keeping their eyes open after a man sneaks into a dorm. Find out what's being done in American to make the dorms safer. District Wire News starts right now. Good evening, and welcome to District Wire News. I'm Nick Pizzano.
And I'm Nikki DeMarco. People in Turkey are reeling after an earthquake on Sunday. Rescue teams and police are attempting to bring relief and restore some order in the midst of chaos. CNN's Barbara Hall takes us there.
It's the most powerful earthquake that Turkey has experienced in more than a decade. A 7.2 magnitude quake shook the eastern part of the country just north of Van Sunday. In the town of Arjas, emergency crews and citizens dug through debris and rubble from dozens of collapsed buildings looking for survivors. Shocked residents filled the streets crying, while some of the injured were carried out of a student dormitory and apartment buildings. Victims were treated in a makeshift hospital amid a series of aftershocks. The last quake of this size in Turkey a dozen years ago killed nearly 900 people. And Istanbul journalist Andrew Finkel says there's reason to believe this time won't be as bad.
There's hope that the damage hasn't been that great. One of the reasons I suspect is because it occurred in the afternoon, on a Sunday afternoon, so there weren't people asleep, there weren't people at work. We're just hoping that the damage will be lower than might have been suspected otherwise.
Now rescue teams are working to survey the damage as countries around the world offer their support. I'm Barbara Hall reporting.
3 months of constant flooding in Thailand has killed 356 people, and more than 9 million are feeling the consequences. According to Thai authorities, this is the worst flooding the country has seen in more than 50 years. The government opened floodgates to send water through canals to the sea, but this has also flooded Bangkok and its suburbs. This morning, the floods reached Don Mueang Airport, one of Bangkok's 2 main airports and home to the Flood Relief Operation Command. The relief operation and some evacuation centers may need to relocate as flood levels rise.
The U.S. ambassador to Syria was pulled out of the country over security concerns. Ambassador Robert Ford returned to D.C. this weekend after threats against his safety. The U.S. State Department says Ford was experiencing intimidation from pro-government officials after his harsh criticism against the violent government crackdown. It is unknown when Ford will return to Syria, but the U.S. Embassy will remain open.
Libyans marched to celebrate Muammar Gaddafi's death and their newfound freedom this weekend. Shouts of joy and gunshots echoed through Benghazi Saturday. Men in uniform cheered alongside civilians, kissing and hugging to celebrate the end of Gaddafi's regime. But the celebrations have a bizarre twist. The deposed leader's body is on display in a freezer in Misrata. Sightseers can pose for photographs with Gaddafi's corpse. The display violates Islamic law, which says a body must be buried within a day after death.
Tunisia is waiting for the results from their first ever free election. Early signs are showing the once banned Islamic Party is in the lead. The Islamic Party ran on protecting human rights and promoting equality. The voter turnout was over 90% on Monday's election. Results are expected later today.
In more foreign news, the war in Iraq is drawing to a close. But what does this mean for U.S. relationships with Iran? Rachel Demita has more on the story.
9 years after President George W. Bush declared war in Iraq, President Obama is announcing that all American troops will leave Iraq by the end of the year. Frank Smythe, a freelance journalist and adjunct professor at American University, says there are risks for pulling troops now.
I think the issue is withdrawing American troops. The question is whether or not that will precipitate more violence. Sectarian violence inside of Iraq, number one, and whether it might also open the door for other nations like Iran to intervene more forcefully than they apparently already have already.
Secretary of State Hillary Clinton warned the Iranian government that the U.S. will still have a presence in Iraq.
No one, most particularly Iran, should miscalculate about our continuing commitment to and with the Iraqis going forward.
Clinton also said the original deadline was made by President Bush.
There also could be political reasons in terms of playing out in the domestic presidential campaign why Secretary Clinton stated that. So I think that the notion that removing American combat troops will open the door to Iran, I don't think is accurate. I think what you may see is that the Iraqi government finally working out its agreements, finally incorporating more of the disenfranchised Shiite groups as well as the Sunni groups, and finally being compelled to sit down at the table and work out their differences.
Iraq and Iran have a long history of border wars, including the 8-year war in the 1980s. From Washington, D.C., Rachel Demita for District Wire News.